Hi, it's Colleen here again with another astrology lesson. So today I thought I would do a lesson on something I do for my clientele. There is a newsletter associated with my website, divinationcounselingservice.org. And in that website, I often will talk about the new moon. So I give predictions based on astrology, trans-Neptunians, and planets for sun signs, excuse me, based in the new moon. And along with that, I use it as an opportunity to teach about other ways we can get more predictive information from the new moon. So today, I'm going to look at the new moon dated July 2nd, 2019. And even though this is dated material, it's still going to come in handy if you're brand new learning how to work with an axis, or maybe not understanding quite what an axis is, or how we came to those conclusions. So think of it as a practice. It's just a predictive practice. So we're going to look at the sun-moon axis, because whenever there is a new moon, it means that the sun and moon are together to begin a new cycle. So this particular time period, we're looking at a moon of 10 degrees 37 minutes of Cancer. And that means that even during the full moon, mind you, it still would be the same, because the full moon is now the opposite point, but on a dial it would still be the same. It's just that new moons make for better predictions because they are new moons. Full moons are reflections. So here in this new moon, I just wanted to go through some of the math, okay? We already did, this is from last web clip, if you will. This is what a dial looks like, okay? So with a dial, you have, oh, how about that, Colleen? How about if we turn it right side up? We have a 0 at the top. You have the first 30 degrees and then the second 30 degrees. And we know that the first 30 degrees would be your cardinal signs. The second 30 to 60 would be your fixed signs, and 60 to 90 would then be your mutable signs. So just a little review on that math. Now, we're using a dial, so I'm still using that. But let's talk about the math. So 1037 of cardinal, okay, so it's on that first 30 degrees. And then when you want to look at the opposite, okay, which in Uranian astrology actually has a name. So I believe it's called the 90 point, but it's really at 45. Okay, so it's what I always got, or D90 or something. But in any event, it's 45 degrees away. Okay, so you could look right at a dial and boom, boom, they would be right across from one another, but you could also do the math. And so what I would do is I would take 1037 and I would add 45 degrees. And that comes up to 5537. Really simple math. Well, 5537 on a dial, and you could look it up, would be in the marks between 30 and 60 degrees. Okay, and so it's at 55, which happens to be the fixed signs of Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio. So here's your 45 degree mark. So we don't even need to really know anything about the signs. That's one of the cool things about doing this kind of astrology. I mean, we do look at the signs. They definitely add flavor to the mixture, but it's this math that tells us so much more. So at 45 degrees away, you're now looking at 2537 fixed. So that falls in this axis. That means if you're a 25 degree Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, or Scorpio, this particular new moon is really hitting you. Maybe good, maybe not so good. That's going to be entirely up to where you are in your life and how that chart reads. But you are affected. So at this point, we then will take 2230. So we have a choice. We're working with a pretty large number here at 50. I'm lazy. So I might be good in math, but I'm also lazy. So 5537 is this 45 point. I can now take 2230 off of that, because half of 45 is 2230. So you see 90 degrees, 45, 2230. It makes perfect sense. So you find that point 2230, and I choose to subtract. Who wouldn't? Okay, and I come up with 3307, and again it would be fixed because it's 3 degrees into fixed. So it becomes 3 degrees 7 minutes of a fixed sign. So that actually fell. Both of those are fixed. So we know the next one. We know for a fact it's going to be mutable because it's the only angle left. And if I were to add 2230 to that 5537, and I could have easily done that, I would have come up with 7807. But there's an easier way. You could put 45 on top of 3307 too. So the math, again, is however works the easiest for you. I hope that wasn't too complicated because I don't want to make something that's very, very simple complicated. But there are more than one approach to coming up with these answers. There isn't a single way of doing it. There's not one of the reasons I love being an astrologer. There just isn't a single way for anything. As a matter of fact, I've come to realize the longer I do astrology that the more markers there are of something, or the more it's a theme, if it's an event chart, then, there's no looking away. So here we go. So we have an axis now for our sun, moon, arms, okay? And those are 10 degrees 37 mutable, 25 degrees 37 fixed, 3 degrees 7 minutes fixed, and 18 degrees 7 minutes mutable. So that makes all that math doable because each of these numbers is designated to like 7807 equals 1807 fixed because it falls in those 30 degrees. So we're breaking everything down to 30 degrees. Okay, so as we look at these arms, one of the fun things to do is pick up all the asteroids, at least the ones you're working with at the time. So, at any point in time in your career, you might be working with a significantly larger number or a significantly smaller one, depending on where you are. This is all a learning process. And so you add or you sprinkle a few of those little asteroids in there, and it creates a flavor, if you will, for your cake or your pie or whatever it is that we're working on. So let's look at this. So as we peek at these asteroids that fall at this axis, we have to take into consideration what does the sun and moon represent. The sun is what drives us. The moon is our emotional security. It's domestic. It's a lot of things. Just like the sun is a lot of things. But keep it simple. Keep it simple because you'll get a lot more out of it. You get too complicated, you have too many layers, and then you get frustrated. So what happens here is we're looking at the sun and the moon. So we're looking at what's driving us. So if we're looking at a predictive chart for the time coming, we're looking at how we're driven. If we're looking in hindsight, we might want to look at what we were doing. How did we feel at the time? How do we feel? There's your moon. Okay, so these are really intermixed. And so when you start looking at these, they say that the ones that are directly across would be the strongest. But if you ask me, it just depends what day it is. Okay, so all of them intermix. All of them create that scenario that you're living through during this time frame. So, we're going to be a little general because I really want this to be for a learning experience. So here, I'm going to do them in smaller groups, play them together, and I want you to know that even as I tell these stories, and again, these are just stories. I just made these up based in the vocabulary that I'm using, which we'll call the asteroids. Okay, so they intermix. They might, in somebody's, you might say, oh my goodness, that's telling me completely what's going on in my life. Yeah, I could believe that too. To somebody else, it might be two situations. Okay, so to somebody else, it might be something that's theirs, but then something that's somebody else's. Again, it's all in how we see it or perceive it. So we're going to look at Hygeia, Dalero, Bacchus, and Ophelia for our first grouping. And this is interesting. I like kind of grouping them together when it's easy for me to write about as well. So, cut me a break here. Anyway, we all get a sense here about cleaning some things up. And in this case, we could become cleaning up some financial things that have gotten out of control, maybe due to some bad habits or some addictions. And again, we can talk about that. I'll get to that later. It's talking about realizing that overreactions can trigger this. So for example, if a person was dealing with, say, a shopping addiction, and they now realize they might have a shopping addiction, they might also realize that it could be an overreaction trigger, okay? So that something is out of control in the behavior. It's being triggered. Another thought might be those who are addicted to their own form of out of control behavior and overreactions. And I think that here we go again with, people always want to look out for themselves, and I get that. I think that sometimes that's an epidemic anymore, but be that as it may. We all have to look out for ourselves on some level. And when you're looking at things like hygeia is your health, your wealth, your well-being. I'm happy because I take care of myself. I clean up my house, or you can fill in the blanks, okay? Because health and well-being is oftentimes in this particular asteroid. This is where I love the asteroids. Those little deviations mean everything. Clearing or cleaning things up. So cleaning up, you're clearing something, you're taking care of something. Dolaro, I think that's self-explanatory. It's dollar, it's finances, it's money. Bacchus, from those, same thing with hygeia, from those little video clips that I've already done, I've spoken about how Bacchus is out of control behavior or addictions. Opioid addiction is based in a Bacchus concept, that ability to, you took that drug because you needed it initially in a lot of cases, but that drug took over your life. And the Bacchus is the part where it takes over your life. And when you think about out of control behavior, even if it's something like a shopping addiction or a gambling addiction, you're still talking Bacchus. It doesn't have to be opioids or drugs. And I say that because it can even mean out of control behavior that's not in that box, such as a person who is out of control gets triggered in some way and then becomes a raving lunatic bully. That's out of control behavior, okay? Now, fortunately, I didn't use Toro in this paragraph. However, I do want to point out as I speak those words, Toro is in this axis. It is on one of the arms of the sun moon. So I didn't talk about it here. I'm going to talk about it later with something else. But yes, please bear that in mind. So Ophelia, which also shows up here, is overreactions. And one of the things as a yogi we talk about, and I talk about when I'm teaching yoga, is that you don't want to have expectations, because if you don't have expectations, you're less likely to overreact. But when you have judgments and you have expectations, there is this tendency to react. And some people, and not always, now some people are more regular at overreaction. Some people it happens sporadically. But overreactions are not always a good thing. So overreactions also falls in this axis. Another lineup to look at here is Amor, Valentine. Notice that they're very similar. We'll get to that. Demeter and Eros. Oh, I'm sorry, Eos. Eos, very different asteroid, might be telling us that we need boundaries with those we love, that we might love them, but we might be accepting a little bit more from their behavior that we should not. That somebody is crossing lines, and even if we love them, we need to pull them back in. Example, Somebody takes someone else's credit card and has a grand old time on it. Yeah. That's a mom or a dad that needs to pull a card. So again, amor, I love you, but this is unacceptable behavior. And I also think when you truly love somebody, you do have to make them accountable to their behavior. As parents, I know as a teacher and also as a parent that I felt it was a better example for me to not accept bad behavior, but to teach them that it's bad behavior. So amor is about that. Amor is love with boundaries and conditions. Valentine is also the heart. So amor is love, and then you've got Valentine, and Valentine's what excites us, and the heart, but it's also the heart, okay? And Demeter is a mother or a parent, because it's a parent-child relationship as well. Oftentimes when you see it in charts, it's parent-child matters and issues, okay? Because that's a whole dynamic relationship that can make or break somebody in many ways. If you come from a dysfunctional family, that affects you. If you came from a family that was pretty healthy, that affects you. So here again, it's things for us to look at from a more objective view. Eos is scattered energies with an emphasis on early morning. So you might have to get up very early in the day in order to get ahead on what's happening because it is so scattered. Okay, so again, boundaries in parent-child relationships can be directly related to a scattering of energies. It can also mean that a parent might have to get up earlier in the morning, both literally and figuratively speaking, to get one up on a child. Okay, and I love you, but you can't continue doing this. And then just a few more points, because we're going to get, the nodes are in here. So, we talked about the parent-child thing, but realize that it might not be the child itself that there's an issue, because child's not in the axis, but the associations of the child, because node is in the axis, or for that matter, associations of the parent. Nodes, I'm going to look at here, nodes, Lee, Wake, Mercury, Sappho, and Merlin. I decided to make this one really big because there's a lot of overlapping. For example, let's look at Mercury and Merlin. Okay, now Merlin might give you the quality of the message, but they're both about messages, and ironically, I don't necessarily trust either one completely. So Mercury is a trickster. Merlin's about magic. Duh. Okay, so then we get Lee, which is websites. Now all of this makes complete sense. Absolute complete sense. Because the associations that you might be making on a website, you have to be very conscious of who you're bonding with, Sappho, because they may not be what they appear to be. They might have an agenda, Merlin and Mercury. They could be younger than you also in the case of those of us who are of a certain age, but again, Mercury is communication. Mercury is also that Lee. A way to communicate with people is the internet. And Lee is a website. So it's describing this. And I understand that, but you got to stay awake. You must remain conscious of who you're bonding with when you're dealing with webs, nodes, associations that way. Because one of the things I like to put down is because it reminds us not to believe all we see on the internet, because there are those with agendas. And we're coming into a new election, and I know that everyone keeps talking about this, so it's really interesting that it falls so early. I will expect to see this kind of lineup again because of the fake news issue. And it will be a real issue if we're already seeing things like this in our astrology. So let's just jump ahead of this. So there's also this idea, and I love this. You take these asteroids and you take these paragraphs even, and you twist around the words and you look at them a little differently. And one of the things that I think is really cool is, with Merlin and Mercury, is the amount of magic you can do on a website. I know that because I'm in the process of working on my own website, and it's a wonderful thing. And it reminds us too how important our communication is via the web, via websites, and how we do have to be really, really careful of what kind of information we're receiving from the internet. And with that said, I'm just going to finish this up by saying that nodes are our contacts or associations. It's also timing. Li, websites. To be awake is wake, to be alert, to be conscious. Mercury is communication, but also trickery. Sappho is bonding, particularly with people that might have a similar agenda. So it's more platonic bonding. It's not intimate bonding. And Merlin can be associated with communication, but also magic manipulation. And adding to this, Li, websites, is running in the axis as well as Taureau, the bully. So be wary, be awake, be wake when it comes to online Li, Taureau, bullying. And with that, I'll say goodbye. And until next time, if you have any more questions, if you'd like to speak with me directly, if there's anything that I can do for you at all, please check out the website, www.divinationcounselingservice.org, and a message will get to me immediately, and I'll get right back to you. In the meantime, happy astrology.